You can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. How are you all doing today, tonight? Everybody's okay? Everybody know where you are? Sort of? Yeah, it's funny because, growing up, I was like the mean person to a lot of people. And then you get into Buddhism and a long time ago, and then you become like the nice person. And then you become part of creating this crazy Dharma Bum temple for the last 15 years, and you get to be the mean person again. It's kind of interesting, you know? I always say, it's not easy being the person to have to kind of roll out guidelines and restrictions and, dare I say, rules, because I know how much we all love rules. But yeah, interesting times just to kind of embrace I should say, become aware of how the mind really goes from, because anyone here ever been mean to anybody? All right. It's really easy to do, right? It can just like that. The mind can be triggered, and all of a sudden, was anyone mean to anyone today? So brave you are, Brian. Do you dare share your mean story? You don't have to. I don't want to put you on the spot any more than I already have.
Oh no, it's my daughter was uphill this morning going to school, and I was not very kind to her and her, issues with going to school. But at 7:45 in the morning, after rushing to get them there,
right?
Patience starts to run.
It goes quick. Yeah. And interesting how it's always not always, but very often it's those that we, right? They have that ability to really kind of push your buttons and trigger you. Often we're more patient with strangers. You ever find that?
Oh yeah.
Right? You could be more patient as the person at Starbucks fails 4 times to make your coffee. But the daughter that you love more than anything in the world does one little thing. How old's your daughter? 10. So how many things is she gonna do right? At 10 years old, they do one little thing and it just triggers us. And it's so easy to kind of slip into that mindset of just being mean towards somebody. And so for me, I've really watched that over the years of how quickly the mind can kind of go back to that place. And it's a beautiful practice of, for me, meditation, concentration. It's a beautiful practice of coming back to the present moment and recognizing that your mind is about to go somewhere that it probably shouldn't go. And then you just come back to breath. I'm breathing. This will pass. I'm going to work through this. And you just stay present with breath. And very often, people think that meditation is about how you meditate. It's not, right? It's about how you bring the meditation practice into every area of your life. And so when you recognize that you're starting to get kind of triggered with something, then you just kind of pause, close your eyes if you want, ideally not when you're driving. But, just pause, close your eyes and take a couple deep breaths, which can bring you back to that moment and just allow the thoughts or words that you want to share or would like to share, just allow yourself to kind of simmer a little bit and let it pass. And the more you practice that, the more you become aware of that, the more you recognize it, the easier it becomes, Because chances are maybe, she'll be asleep by the time you get home tonight or tomorrow, chances are it's not going to be too many more hours before she does something that pushes the buttons, right? And so then there's our practice, No greater Buddhist practice than a 10-year-old child, so I'm told. So, congratulations. You have your built-in Zen master right there with you every moment,
Or we're just getting started.
And you are just getting started. You think 10 is rough, wait till 15. But yeah, so you can just, bow to your Zen master every day and thank her for teaching you all that you need to learn. Oh, so fun. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and start a meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin. For those who might be new, nothing's going to happen to you, right? It won't float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. You don't ask yourself, is it working or not working? Doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and the practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all the chaos. So posture, if you're on a cushion, often it helps. Slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or the lap, whatever's comfortable. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Gently guide the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, just as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after, compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. And ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit, hold the hands, or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. And this is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply for all of us, regardless of where we come from or what we believe in or where we think we're going, our whole life is filled with things that happen. And we react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how we respond to things throughout the day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with that mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Not drums or 10-year-old daughters, right? Our whole life is filled with things that can distract us constantly. And it's because we set up a box of how we want things to happen. We have been doing that our entire lives. I mean, I don't know, maybe you haven't, but I have, and most people I encounter do. We have an idea, an expectation. We have a plan, right? We have a schedule, we have a time, everything laid out. And then we go through our day and it doesn't work that way. And for some reason, we keep thinking it's going to. So we get through the day and we start the next day and we say, okay, here's my plan today and this is how it's going to work and everything's going to go exactly how I want it to. And then, by 8 a.m., that's all gone to somewhere else. And so then we are challenged each day with dealing with things that don't go how we want it to. And so much of the meditation practice and the Buddhist teachings is learning to be with things as they are, as opposed to having them be how we want them to be. Because life is just going to turn out around us how it's going to turn out. Now, we have an impact on that, of course. Our thoughts, our words, our actions really do create the environment around us. But, majority of the environment around us, if not all of it, we can't control any of it. We impact it by what we bring into it, but we can't control it. So as things happen, we're learning to be less responsive. And that's really what the meditation practice for me has always been about, and my understanding of the Buddhist teachings. Is the meditation doesn't make you better person or, right? I just have to read it because I feel like I've been saying this similar thing for years. And then I saw there's a great Zen teacher, John Daido. Some of you may be familiar with him. But I came across, I'd never seen this quote before. And I just thought it was brilliant. And it was like, there's been other teachings along the way that like, I feel like I've been trying to express for years to people. And for whatever reason, it just doesn't click. And then I'll read some great, Buddhist teacher's expression of the exact same thing. And I'm like, yes, that's it. That's what I've been trying to say. And so you have to excuse my language here, but it's totally important that I read it as is. So, any kids in here, please you still do earmuffs? Is that a thing? No, I don't know. But yeah, so if there's any kids at home and our millions of YouTube followers, please cover your ears. But so John Daido, the quote is, "Those who think Buddhism is just about stillness end up sitting very silently up to their necks in their own shit." Again, excuse my language. I wouldn't usually, but I just think in the nature of this, it's important. All right. Could have changed it. But think about that. Those who think Buddhism is just about stillness end up sitting very silently up to their necks in their own stuff. All right. And I just find so much beauty to that teaching, because we often think, especially if you're new to Buddhism, that it means you're going to escape and run to this perfect, quiet, happy place. And then when you get there, wherever that is, or if it's here or wherever you go to, when you sit down and you're silent and you're still, what are you left with? Your own stuff. So the practice is to begin to understand, how do I work with all that stuff that's causing me pain and suffering? And how do I work with this practice to bring more joy and happiness into my life? And part of that comes from abandoning and letting go of some of these ideas and expectations, and kind of shattering that box of how you want your life to go, and just trying your best to find endless gratitude and appreciation for how your life actually is. Right? I mean, all of us in this room right now, if we're able to sit here on a Tuesday night at 7:00 and had the means to get here and the means to eat and have clothes and, all that kind of stuff, we're all doing pretty good. But very often we don't stop long enough to appreciate that and be grateful for that. Because it's so easy to just kind of shift into, that mind that says everything is wrong. So, and this isn't, for me, always important to remind myself and everybody that, Buddhist practice, it's not a quick fix solution. It's not a 6-week course that all of a sudden you're like, okay, I got it. It is a lifelong practice, because your whole life you'll be challenged. And if we can have a mind, and that's where the meditation practice comes into play, if we can have a mind that is a little more steady, a little more calm, then when things go how we don't want them to, we respond to it in a kinder, gentler way. So, all much easier said than done. I get it. And that's why it's called a practice. No matter how many kind, loving, gentle Buddhist books you read, you still have to get out and go into the world where a lot of people are being mean and nasty. I know none of that is us in the room here. We're just surrounded by the nice people. So I'm happy for that. But yeah, it's a practice. So I'll pause there. I'd rather just, as always, respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that you're sitting with. I'd rather use the rest of the time tonight just to address your questions or your thoughts. And we'll go from there. So, but let me ask you this first. Did that quote or idea resonate in any way with, yeah? Do you want to expand? Did your hand go up or did you have an itch? Huh?
My hand went up.
Oh, okay, yeah. Do you want to expand?
Yes. First, I want to thank you for providing the sanctuary so that I could quiet my mind and do the work. So, as I was meditating, I wasn't thinking about my own excrement, but I was thinking how the outside world is outside right now, and what's going on in here. And as you were guiding us, let go of those thoughts. I was actually doing that in my mind. I had a thought and I let go of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm honestly, this is new to me, but and I know you're not a teacher and I'm not a student. But
You're actually the teacher. That's the funny thing.
Okay, I'm going to push back and say I am learning something. So
Good.
leave it at that.
Yeah.
I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
Okay? There's something you said last week that for me, where I am in my life, is so profound. I work with at-risk youth, as we talked about, and you've had experience too working with trauma survivors.
Yeah.
So there's a resonance there. And you said it happened, but it's not happening now.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like something cracked open for me when you said that.
Yeah.
And whenever you and I talk, I don't like to say too much because I want to let you do your thing. So I'm going to stop there. And
Okay.
take it from
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. Yeah. The idea, and what's interesting for me is, it was actually the exact same time, which I hadn't really thought about too much until right now, but 26 years ago, yeah, so I'm 46, so I was 20. And that was the very first time I was introduced to Buddhist practice. And I took a Chinese civilization class in college because my brother said it would be an easy A. He was right. It was an easy A. But we also had to read Intro to Zen by D.T. Suzuki. And so I was reading this book, and at the same time, as a psychology student and thinking I would go into a kind of path of clinical psychology and all that stuff, I was working at a group home counseling adolescent females, all that had been physically, sexually, emotionally abused. So I'm 20, these kids are 15, and they've been through it. And so my work with that population started 26 years ago, the exact same time I'm reading Zen books. And then that led to others. And it was really at that time that I began to realize that when we were sitting, and I really didn't, it was years later that it all really made sense when I would reflect back on it. But when I was sitting with those kids, at that moment, when we were sitting together, at that moment, there was nothing wrong. Nothing. Right? Until we started talking about their feelings and their emotions and their experiences and their pain and their trauma. And then they're reliving it over and over and over again. And so when I started to really years ago look at Zen practice, working with that population, the stories that all of us in this room tell ourselves. We've all had our own traumatic experiences, some maybe more so than others, but that's all relevant really anyway. So I never want to minimize the pain or suffering that anyone goes through. It's all relative. I think I said relevant. It's all relative. I said relevant, right? Yeah, it's all relative to our own experience. But it's important to understand that when we're sitting, that trauma that we have experienced is not occurring. until we focus on it, until we talk about it. And even when we focus on it and when we talk about it and when we share it and when we think about it, it's not occurring then either. But what we're doing is we're reliving it. And I also want to throw a little asterisk in here for, I know a lot of people come here in therapy. I'm not suggesting stop therapy, nor am I suggesting that you stop sharing or exploring or talking about whatever you're working through. Please keep doing that. But that's where I see Buddhist practice very different from therapy. Therapy, it's important to explore and do all those types of things. Leave that for therapy. Buddhist practice, people use it that way, but Buddhist practice is about being present with things as they are. And in that present moment, you're just sitting. So, again, reflecting back on those early days of having that experience from reading and sitting with kids, and then many years later looking at it, I was like, oh yeah, that's why in that circle, there were like 6 girls that lived in this little group home. In that circle, for the 6 or 7 of us, there was nothing wrong. For those 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, we were sitting and breathing. And then the circle opens up and we all share, and then everybody's in tears and feeling the pain and the heartache and the trauma. And it just perpetuates from there. So I think I've made this perfectly clear, but in case there's anyone here or, watching that doesn't know me, I'm definitely not trying to avoid having you explore the experiences you've gone through. But there's also the approach of just saying, I've made it. I'm here. And here is okay. Yeah.
I just want to follow up real quick.
Yeah.
Okay? Thank you.
Yeah.
So much. So I am in therapy for what I thought was going to be trauma resolution. What really is just be changing my relationship with the trauma.
Right.
So in the past, if I got stuck in my trauma, I might try to self-medicate. But what I'm finding is that meditation is a coping strategy that's healthy for me. And would you mind speaking on that?
Yeah, the meditation practice as a coping skill to deal with trauma is vital, because one of the ideas and, dare I say, purposes of meditation is to concentrate and focus on the present moment. And when we are going through trauma and we're having triggers, flashbacks, memories, whatever you want to call it, we have lots of things we turn to. Anyone have unhealthy coping? That was quick, right? We have unhealthy. I didn't even finish the sentence. Anyone have unhealthy? You're like, yes, I'm all in, right? So we have unhealthy coping skills, mechanisms, things we turn to, on various extremes. Some are, not so bad, and some are really bad. It just kind of depends what it is. And then there are healthy things that we turn to. Either way, they're all things that we turn to. Ultimately, for me, the practice is to not have to turn to anything to cope. It's to just recognize this is what has happened. This was my experience, and I'm going to see what it makes me feel like when I explore it, and what is it like to sit with it without having to turn to anything. Does it make my head hurt? Does it make my heart hurt? Does it make my back hurt? Does it make me feel sick to my stomach? Does it make me, what does it make me feel like? That's being with the experience. If you are going to turn to something, which most of us will, then meditation is a beautiful, healthy thing to turn to versus the unhealthy things that we often turn to. Simple drugs, alcohol, overeating. There's a lot of things that really can become unhealthy for us physically, mentally, emotionally. Meditation, exercising, reading, those are also things we turn to, but they're just better for us. So does that help address?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For sure. Years ago, there was a guy, and he shared a story. He was at a recovery convention. I was doing a meditation thing, and anyways, in those environments, I would lead just 5-minute meditations. And the 5-minute meditation was done, and he opened his eyes, and I'm asking people how they feel, and he was like, "I feel like I just went on." He would do bike rides. That was his escape. And he would go on an hour, 2, 3, 4 hour long bike rides. And 5 minutes of meditation, he said he felt exactly how he feels after a 2 to 3 hour bike ride. So one, he thanked me for saving him a lot of time. Keep the bike riding. But it's just that we begin to recognize that if we cultivate a daily meditation practice, in a few minutes, we can just settle everything without having to find something to turn to run to. So, other questions, thoughts, or when I shared the quote, anything that brings up for you? Yeah.
So I'm reading this book, and in the book they mentioned the Buddha had 2 Dharma teachers prior to his awakening.
Yes.
But I didn't really catch who they were, what you learned from them. Could you shed any light on that?
So the question was, you're reading the book, and it talks about the Buddha had 2 teachers prior to awakening. And can I, shed some light on that? So yes, he had, during his kind of 6-year journey, right, when he left home at 29 and he awakened at 35. So along that time, they did lots of different yogi, ascetic practices. And he came across 2 teachers. And both, and one I know for sure, but they both wanted to keep him as a student, right? One of them even said, I'll basically step down, right? Again, in whatever terms they would have. Figured I'd wait instead of trying to yell over the helicopter, because they probably weren't going to wait for me, so I figured I'd wait for them. So one of the teachers even was like, "Hey, I'll step down. Here, you can have all my students, right?" And he learned a lot from both of them. But to me, and Alex does a wonderful, when he tells the story of Siddhartha, the most important piece about the 2 teachers that he had is he left them both. Why? Why do you think he left them both?
He had gotten what they needed from them and wanted to continue going on this path?
Possibly, yes. Yes, he got what he needed. But if the practice is to eradicate suffering, can any teacher do that for you? No. What he realized was that the only way he could figure out how to end his suffering was on his own. No teacher could do that for him. Now, this is always, for me, kind of a much deeper kind of discussion, because I do think having teachers along the way, people you learn from along the way, critical. It's been critical in my, Buddhist journey. I think it's really important to have people that you learn from. That's how we all do it. We all learn together, right? But the danger is when people come into Buddhism and they're looking up at this person and they're like, they're going to show me the way. And hopefully what that person is telling you is like, no, only you can find the way. I can't show you, You have to do it. I mean, maybe someone can open the doors a little bit, but you have to do it. And I jump ahead to the last thing which ties into this, when the Buddha died. And it was at that moment where he was, he was 80 years old and it was his time, and he'd eaten some really unhealthy food, poisonous food, and it was his time to die. And all the disciples are gathered around, and they're like, most of them are crying, and they're like, oh no, who's going to teach us now? They're like, the great enlightened one is leaving us, who's going to show us the way? And he said to them, basically, I've been teaching you all for 45 years, right? I mean, I kind of, in my mind, I'm thinking like, the dude's been doing it for 45 years. If you haven't figured it out by now, right? And he said, be a light unto yourself and strive on with diligence. I've always found that to be the most important teaching of the Buddha, because here you have this great teacher for 45 years. And at the last moment, it's like, what's the message he's going to leave with everybody? And he basically said, be your own light, but work hard at it. Be diligent. So if you kind of look at like the two stages of his life, where he's somewhere in his, early 30s, and he comes across these two teachers, right? And he leaves them both. And then at the end, he says, you got to do it yourself. And I will make it a little personal, but even though I try not to be too personal ever, but I guarantee, so I've known Dylan for a couple of years now through a college group and blah, blah, blah. I guarantee you have already read and learned everything about Buddhism that you already need to know. There's nothing more you need to know to be a fully awakened being. It's not one more book. It's not one more teacher. It's not one more retreat. It's not one more anything. You just have to do it. All right? And that goes for all of us in this room. I mean, I get it. If this is your first time ever hearing Buddhist teachings, maybe hear it like 2 or 3 more times. So, but like the Four Noble Truths, the very first fundamental teaching, life is filled with suffering. The cause of it is the second noble truth, the greed, anger, ignorance. You overcome greed, anger, ignorance with generosity, compassion, wisdom. The third noble truth is the ending of suffering. And the fourth is the path, eightfold path. The correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. Done. End of story. That is all, in my opinion, from what I've learned in the Buddhist teachings, all of the 45 years worth of teachings that he shared are in the Four Noble Truths, right there. He just said it, as they say, 80,000 different ways, because we all learn differently. And I get it. I mean, I know I'm going to say something like that, and you're going to go home and read another 100 pages of a Buddhist book. So I don't say something like that to get somebody to stop reading. And I also want to say that it takes different things to trigger us, to inspire us, to motivate us, to deepen our practice, to commit even more to that diligence part of things. And that's for each person to explore on their own. For me as a practitioner, I eventually reached a point where I was like, I just don't want to be miserable and depressed anymore, ever. I cannot spend my life one more day miserable and depressed. There's got to be a better way to live. And when you reach that point, it's life-changing. Now, if that's not your thing, for me, it was anger and depression. Whatever drove you all here, there's something. And once you kind of find what that is, then you just have to practice this stuff. And sometimes it does take different people saying things different ways in a book, or, for someone you learn from. But even then, you still have to do the work, You have to be kind to people. No teacher is going to be kind to people for you. You have to forgive people, including yourselves. No teacher can do that for you. They can tell you day in and day out to do all this stuff. And so, yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Yeah. And to be fair, I just gave him a book like 5 days ago to read. So, other questions, thoughts? Yeah.
So a few years ago, I had found a video on Tonglen, if I'm saying that right, meditation.
Yeah.
And I thought it really resonated with me and really enjoyed it the first time. And let's say I did it 10, 12 more times. And each time I did this meditation, it got more intense. Same meditation, just different feelings. The final time I actually listened to it, it just became so real that I had to stop it. It was just this practice of imagining this intense suffering of others and trying to help those people. And it just became, like I said, so heavy that I was like, I can't do this. This is just too much right now. This is just real life for me right now.
Yes.
Just suffering just everywhere around me. And I often kind of go back and wonder, was I just at this point where maybe I needed to continue, try again, and see if there was something that maybe I could have, I don't know, found something out of, continuing that practice and maybe doing it another time, or I don't know, any advice or any,
So the question, just to repeat, and then we'll close with this, is years ago you found a Tonglen practice and you would do it consistently, and each time and period, over time it got more and more intense. And how recently was this that you were just like, this is very recent?
No, this is probably like a couple years ago.
When you stopped doing it?
Yeah.
Okay. So then a few years ago it just became too much for you, too intense, and you had to stop. Anything I would say to that is, I'm guessing at everything else I'm saying also, so this would be even more so. But if you had said to me that, like 6 months ago was when you realized it was too much, I had to stop, I probably would respond differently. But if it's been a few years since you've stopped, try it again. If it was something that obviously if you did it, you enjoyed it, or you benefited, or you loved it, even as it got intense, if you did it for a while, it meant something to you. It was an important practice for you. And it sounds like you distanced yourself from it for a while, but for whatever reason, and being in the work that you do as a medical professional during a pandemic, you are surrounded by suffering more than you've potentially ever been in your entire life. And maybe that has something to do with the fact that this Tonglen practice is like coming up again for you. So I don't have any attempt at wisdom to share other than try it and see how it goes. And if you do it and it's like, yep, no, not ready for this yet, then there's your answer. But after having a break from it and going through what you're going through right now, and really what we're all going through right now in our own ways, see what happens. It could be incredibly beneficial, and it could remain even more than ever too intense. And you might know during, if you completely break down and start crying, and you're just like, I can't do this. So, I don't know.
I'll follow up with you.
Yeah, let me know how it goes. All right. Anything else before we close? All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to more than 4 million lives who've been lost during this pandemic, and to their family and friends who continue to suffer at this time. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. So a few quick announcements before you head out. Thanks all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this space about 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. So we appreciate you showing up. Just about every night, we have different classes going on, different Buddhist traditions. Those of us who lead, we're not monks or nuns, we're not gurus or masters or teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. So every night, as I said, different practices going on. We do have a very limited schedule and just kind of restricting things right now. So we appreciate you kind of playing along with us with that. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night, we do sit here 7 to 8. And Saturday morning at 11, we sit here. And then our recovery Sangha right now in person is Tuesday night at 7. So that's downstairs right now. And Sunday morning at 10. Other than that, everything is virtual. Temple stays closed all day. We open up at night for when we have classes. And then Monday through Friday, we also sit at 8 and 8:30. So if you ever want to just come in the morning, it's a 25-minute sit. You can come, pop in at 8 or 8:25, 8:30 and just sit, for a bit in the morning. So other than that, we appreciate you being here and, great thoughts, questions, comments. And we talk a lot about Sangha, community. You mentioned talking about friendship tomorrow night. Like Buddhism will bring up heavy stuff. And because it forces you to really kind of look at your experiences. And so when heavy stuff comes up, it helps to be around people that are also exploring heavy stuff. Otherwise, you're stuck staring at a wall, exploring it on your own. And take it from me, that can be quite miserable. So thanks all for being here. Be safe. Good luck. See you soon.
See you tomorrow.
Thanks, dude. Good to see you, man.
Yeah.
Life is okay?
Yeah. So it's always a drama. But I had a question. I was gonna